Meeting's called to order. So welcome to the July pre-planning meeting for the City of Frederick Planning Commission. We have what looks to be pretty robust agenda for Monday, so let's get right into it. Let's start with the continuances, and for this, we'll turn it over to Gabrielle.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, the U-Haul application is both the final site plan and the combined forest conservation plan. The applicant has asked for another continuance. This will be the second that they've asked for. First, last month, it was due to some comments that came up about utility relocations for Washington Gas. As well as some right-of-way issues that they needed to work through with us. In doing that, they disturbed some landscaping and kind of required them to retool some of the frontage improvements. They requested this continuance for another 30 days because as a result of that, they also wanted to make some adjustments to, as I understand, I haven't seen the plan yet, the front of the building. So another 30-day continuance for this before we'll see that at a regular hearing.
Okay. Any questions or comments? I can see you all. Okay, great. Moving along, next is the annual report. Also, Gabrielle.
Yes, correct. So every year we do present this. I think we're actually a month behind when we normally do, but it is a requirement under the state legislation for the city and all municipalities and counties to produce kind of an annual report summary of the work that we do. There's no formal approval process that needs to happen, but we do present it to the Planning Commission, and then we will send it down to the state where they archive these things. If you have any comments, because we don't have to approve it on Monday night, please take a look over it. If you see anything in terms of even edits or corrections or anything like that, we're happy to take those and we can incorporate them. You don't have to necessarily give us those Monday night, but if you see anything in your review that isn't resonating, let us know and we can make those adjustments to it. And then we publish it on our city's website. We actually have our collection of annual reports on there. So kind of a neat archive of what we're doing every year in terms of volume of applications and types of applications we see. So if you really wanted to geek out to it and sit down and look, comprehensively from year to year to see how things have changed, I'm sure there would be some probably really interesting patterns that make sense as we've grown and changed.
So can you remind us the period of time this covers?
This is just a one-year time frame, so we do it every year. This is for 2022.
No, so I should have asked. So is that January 1st through December 31st?
Yeah, not fiscal, not like the CIP. This is just the actual year itself.
Ron, did you have a question?
No, not at all.
Okay. I do notice, and we can say this on Monday if you want, Ron Burns is in here. I think he's been gone for a while.
Yes, he might have been gone. I did get an email from him the other day, though.
Well, that's
he's
nice.
back. He's back off it. What did he say? It was his 2 or 3 year vacation. He's back, and now he's out there. So out there watching. But yes, okay. I think it's been longer than a year.
And then the other question is, like, April joined us. Didn't April join us before 2023?
Oh, I would have to go back.
I did join in 2022.
That's what I meant. Yeah. Yeah. So I wasn't sure if like I know Kelly was involved most of the year, but not all of the year. So how does that work when there's a change?
Generally, we include everyone who was active in that time period. So if you were a planning commission member just in January of that year and then left, we would include.
Okay. So one, we would add April, and would you also then have Ben?
Yes, he should be on there as
well. Okay. And the election I didn't look it up, but Roger Wilson is listed here as an alderman. Was he an alderman through last fall? I didn't think so. He came off before 2022. So if you just take a look at that first sheet, that seems to need a lot of little cleaning up.
Yeah.
I have to bring all that up. Any other comments and questions?
Nope.
Okay. I did see a few typos, but I won't bring those up on Monday.
If you want to, like I said, if you see anything that would help us to improve the document, you can also just shoot them in an email. That'd be awesome.
All right, text amendments.
Correct. This is the continuation. We did discuss it at the hearing last month. And for lack of a better term, I think we reached a bit of a stalemate. We had 4 voting members, and I don't use the word fail in a failure sense, but failed to reach a motion that would carry. So it was continued for further discussion. So the goal, a little bit of a challenge. We have 4 different members. I mean, not 4 completely different members, but Dorothy will be gone, as will Alderman McShane. April and Barb will be new to the discussion for the hearing. To April, I'm sorry, are you?
I'm here on the 10th.
Yeah, you'll be. Did I say April? Dorothy will be out and Ben will be out, but April and Barb will be back. So kind of a different group of players to discuss this. So yeah, I got you. I'm sorry. Brain's going faster than my mouth. So we'll continue to discuss it. I did speak with Scott Waxter a little bit on yesterday about the issue of what happens when we reach a stalemate and we can't find a motion that would carry. I think we discussed it a little bit at the hearing last month, but some situations are simpler than others, right? If there was a vote on a landscaping modification that we were having the same sort of conflict on, there's a high likelihood maybe that someone could say, okay, well, what if I amend my motion to add 2 more trees? And that may get somebody to come one way or another, right? That it may be a little easier to get to yes and to work, or no would be an okay recommendation too, right? I think this is harder because it's a lot more kind of policy, right? And either I feel strongly this way or I feel strongly that way, and it's a little bit harder to get to a passing motion, whether that would be against or for. Either way, the motion passes, and we can move that on to the mayor and board. One of the recommendations or thoughts that Scott Waxter had was that our rules of procedure do not speak to. Alderman McShane had raised the question of, well, what do you do when that happens? What happens? Does it just stop and it can't go anywhere? Or do you just forward it to the mayor and board anyway and say, well, they couldn't figure out an answer? And our rules of procedure don't really address that. So his thought, if we find ourselves in the same situation where we can't get to a yes or a no, would be to recommend amending the rules of procedure to specifically address that. And one of the examples or thoughts that he had come across was that you could amend the rules of procedure to basically say that a failure to pass a motion equates to a decision to keep the legislation the way it is, right? That the consensus then is just leave it alone. Nothing happens with it. So which would in effect be a denial of the amendment because someone's proposing to amend it. So if you just say, no, we want to leave it as it is, that.
So leave it as it is, not as it's been presented.
Yes,
okay.
Leave it as it's written in the code currently. That could be that on legislative decisions, you could amend the rules of procedure to basically say that a failure to pass a motion equals a decision to leave the legislation as it is in the code currently, not as it's proposed. So hopefully, and I would encourage, and I don't know if the applicant will have anything new to present, if there will be any, different discussion, maybe because we do have, different players that provides an opportunity for some different insights to be shared. But I would recommend that we try to get to a passing or a failing motion, one or the other, that, we be deliberate in our discussions about ways that, if we could amend it this way, if we could amend it that way, if there are those areas that anyone can, articulate that we we spend a lot of time on that before amending the rules, which would be a fine thing to do as well. The one thing I would note with the rules is to amend the rules, we have to propose the amendment at one meeting and then vote at another meeting. So you couldn't change the rules that night. You would have to propose the rule change, which if we get to that point as staff, we can help to articulate what that rule change would be. And then at the next meeting, we have to advertise it. And then at the next meeting, you would be able to vote on the change to the rules, and then you would be able to take action or no action on this item. That all makes sense, kind of.
I'm a little confused in terms of the need to change. So, well, first of all, this workshop is not a time to have that discussion, correct? The discussion that we're going to have needs to take place on Monday.
About the text amendment, correct? Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
So what is I don't understand the need for a rule change, or is it really clarifying because we're in this gray area that we don't know what would happen? I mean,
it's a failure to reach a majority vote.
Okay.
Right.
And what rule changes? Just give me an example of what that rule change language is, especially since we can't vote on it on Monday. So Monday it'd just be basically laid back on the table again.
Right. To continue to have the dialogue we were having about the merits of the text amendment. Right.
And if we don't reach a consensus on that, what is the proposed rules? What I don't understand why we need a rule. What are we changing?
So the rules of procedure don't speak to when you don't.
What happens if
what happens if you fail to meet that majority in this case? But obviously we have to do something. Something has to happen.
Right.
We wouldn't be like, well, applicant, I'm sorry, you just have to sit here with this check, like go home because we're not going to act on this. So we need to have some path to continue the item moving forward. And so the proposal would be to add to the rules of procedure that in an instance of legislative changes where a motion fails to carry, that equals, I don't know what word you would use, but that is tantamount to a decision to let the legislation stand as it's currently written in the code.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm glad you qualified legislative changes. Oh, sorry, Ron.
Yeah.
I stepped on you.
No, not at all. Because that clarifies what my understanding is too. So who's gonna come up with that language?
That would be Scott Lancaster.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we would help if that is the situation. Like I said, I think the goal is we want a motion that passes for or against, or with amendments, right? We can also say we support this if you change it to say X, Y, and Z. We don't need that exact language, so you don't have to feel like you need to craft, wording for how the code would look. But you could say we approve it with the caveat that all cars be painted blue, or whatever it might be.
Okay.
I did write down what you had said, and I'm glad that Scott would be then available to provide the specific language and and thank you for addressing that. What other questions or comments does anyone have on this? I have a few just because I've been out, and I have listened and I was telling the group that I've listened to hours, but I've set, I haven't listened to all the hours. I've set time on Saturday and Monday aside. So when I am there on Monday night, I will have heard all the deliberation and gotten completely up to speed. So my questions: one, is there any written public comment on this item? I didn't see any in the package.
I think we had one email that was part of the packet.
Okay. And that email was emailed to everybody, or is it in the packet?
That should have been in the packet. And we also, I think we had um, supplemental response examples.
I did not see it
Maybe
in the
it was
packet.
previously emailed.
Okay.
Oh,
All right. So
it is at the very end after in the online version. It's after this fourth scenario.
oh, I see it.
presentation.
Actually, it's the very last page. Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure I captured that. When you said it was substantially the same, when I read through this, that looked to me, there was no changes in the rationale and no changes in the text amendment language itself. By substantially the same, do you mean on page 9, it taking up most of the page was a June update? Is that the only thing that was changed?
Correct. Yeah, the ordinance itself is completely the same as well as the analysis.
Okay. Question here. I know there was a whole lot about the number of parking spaces and the 0.75, and in the Osherman example, they use the 0.56 because it's within that. I'm not going to use it. They got the additional reduction due to that they were located in that a quarter mile from the transit, right? In the staff report, it keeps using 0.6. Is that just the 0.5 rounded up to 0.6? The 0.56 rounded up to 0.6?
No, that was 0.6 spaces, which would be the lowest. So you had the 1.5 spaces that you could cut into,
right.
that you could cut into half to 0.75 spaces. But then there's a further reduction of 25%, which would get you down to 0.6 spaces per unit.
Well, it's actually exactly, it is 0.56. Okay, because if you take 75% of 75, it is 0.56.
Rounding.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that that was the same calculation. And just for my edification and anybody else's, when that's applied, do you actually use the 0.56, or does it get rounded up that you use the 0.6?
You round up a half a space.
So you round up 0.04 to 0.6.
Right. Yeah.
We've just been looking at in the workshops when I was there and talking about the 0.56. So that's why when I saw in your staff report the 0.6.
0.6, yeah. So you have your, oops, your 1.5.
But didn't the applicant say that they're not going to look for that additional 25%? It just never made it into their language for the text amendment.
0.57.
It doesn't need to make it into the language because there's already legislation in place that would give it to them.
Correct.
So when you look here on page on Exhibit B as part of the package, the example does use the 0.56.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. I was rounding that to 0.6.
Okay, got it. Just wanted to make sure. I just have one last question, and I'm sure that we talked about this, and I just can't remember. In the language of the text amendment itself, I know the original text recommended language did not have this addition to under the scope 2C. What does the language, the provisions of subsections F and I of this section shall not apply to, what does that actually do?
The provisions of subsection F and I.
Because then later down, I think F was taken out, so I got kind of confused. F and I.
This section, A, B, C, D, E, E, F, and I, R. Or if I might have to go back and look at that and recall why we
Okay.
were changing that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
It just wasn't, as I read it, I was going, what does that do? What's that there for?
Yeah,
And I couldn't remember.
I'll have to look back at what iteration that was and why that was added.
Now I'll say, anybody else have any questions?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, that moves us to Madison Street and the final plat, which is PC 23-168.
Yes, that is my plat. There were no changes from the workshop. It's all the same. It was pretty straightforward. There weren't any questions or changes required on it. So that's going to be, I think, a pretty straightforward case.
Any questions from anybody? Thank you, Monica. I don't think I've had a chance to meet you yet. So
No, well, I think we met. It's been a little while, but hello.
oh, now I'm embarrassed. Well, hello
No.
again.
Well, I haven't. This will be my first case that I presented to the Planning Commission. Okay. All the other times I've been sitting in the audience just soaking it in.
Okay. And thank you for clarifying that. You actually do look familiar, so that is why. Okay. Now we move on to the final plat for Block M, lots 5 and 6, Linden Hills, PC 23-157.
Yes, that is also me, and I would like to say ditto. It's another one that had no changes. There were no comments. That's one where they were rearranging the blocks, the two lots to face from Linden to face Poplar. They made a pretty good case for why there was some discussion about whether or not the blocks fit the neighborhood. I think they made a pretty decent case. We didn't have any questions for them at the workshop. So no modifications requested or anything like that.
Okay. Any questions of the? Okay. I just have a couple quick ones.
Yes,
and again, this is, I haven't listened to everything yet. So the house 1003, that's on lot 7, right? That's
correct.
The
yep.
lot that's not going to change, right?
Yeah, these two lots are both vacant.
And as you said, it looks to be a simple orientation, and I will read this in depth. It was interesting to note that Linden has no sides, that this will be the only place on Linden where it's going to be the sides of the street. So in that way,
You've muted again.
Sorry, last thing I heard was in that way.
So in that way, by changing the orientation, it won't be similar to the rest because this will be the only place on Linden that has the side of the house. But in the other aspects of the characteristics, and I did read those, it'll be similar. So I take that to mean that the staff is not concerned about the characteristic that this is the only place on Linden where it has its side.
Correct, right? Because as it stands now, the one lot, the building envelope is a really bizarre and unbuildable shape. It's something like 8 or 10 feet wide. So by reorienting it, it makes both lots developable. Because otherwise, the other building envelope is just.
Okay. Thank you for saying that. I read that. I'll go back and take notes. That really is helpful. Anybody else? Okay. Next one, the next two are for Madison on Market. The first is a final site plan, PC 23-74, and the second is the preliminary forest conservation plan, PC 23-75.
Yes, and you've heard this before, this plan actually before when it was going through for its master plan, whatever. And they don't have any modifications at this time, but they do have a number of conditions. Um, two of them, the first one, of course, they're going to have to go to the mayor board for their fee in lieu of the parkland amount. And then also two was a condition of the um, master plan that they were to have the national green building standards and in their building elevations. And because of timing and everything, when these things are issued, we're just asking them to be submitted at some point to the city to verify that that's been done. And they've got other just cleanup notes and everything. And then this plan had been, you know, uh, before you before, but they are now adding a pump station for their sewer, and that is was a major change for this project. And so they've got to come into it in a pump station, and that's about it.
What about the preliminary forest conservation plan? Did your comments address that too?
Um, what address what you're talking about? The pump
Address,
station?
well, no, specifically, I'll ask my question. I found it very interesting that add the following notes to the conditions, all these inspections, which I think is great. I don't remember seeing any notes like this relative to inspections of forest conservation plantings. Is this now typical? Is it specific to this one property? Can you explain?
Usually these are cleaned up at the time we've gone through DRC with the projects and things like that. This was just something that needed more cleanup, and I added those to this this forest plan to make sure the notes got cleaned up. But usually these inspection notes are typical to make sure they know um, what their 2-year planting is, supplement planting, and how far, their survival rate and so forth. But it's just documented for the inspector and everything. But these are typical notes.
Very, very good. I'm going to ask you a question of or someone who has it, of another one coming up, a couple of, and I wasn't aware of this, so this was very interesting.
Yeah, they should be on your planting plans. Now, if you've only got retention and, of course, in fee in lieu of projects, you're not going to have these notes. It's only when you're going to be planting and making sure the inspections are meeting their survival rates each 2 years, or if they plant more, that they have to survive 2 years.
Any questions? And it didn't look like there's anything new from the workshop, right?
No, not really. No.
Okay. Thanks, Pam. Next is the final site plan for Gambrill View, PC 23-186.
Okay. This is one that is sort of similar to your part one of Waverly, where they wanted to put their patios and their front yards for these units. And with part one, of course, they limited to a certain number of units, and they identified those units that they thought they needed and which ones would have retaining walls. They're asking for area A, that this be optional for all of the units. They have listed out the ones that will require retaining walls, and they're in a situation where, because they're putting the retaining walls, they're not able to provide landscaping around those walls, but they are going to put landscaping around the other patios on the other lots, and most of them are at ground level. So, and we did give you some renderings that they did provide, just showing that they're going to be putting those plants around. They have a detail on the plan also. They do have two modifications that One was for the side entry that they want to use on end units. Um, and that was for modification to 606K2. And that was, as we said, for safety, not, not obstructing anything, or public utility, not obstructing anything there. The stoops are only going to be very small. They're looking at 2 feet high for the stoops, and then the patios are at ground level. The other one was the modifications for the fence and retaining walls, as we had done before, being in the front yard. And that also had to comply with Section 821D2 for site triangle, and one of the more substantive thing that we would not want anything to, get in the way on the street or on a corner or anything like that. So for most part, it's following with the consistency of now following through with part one, because they've already introduced those patios on the other parts of the subdivision. And then the approval for the site plan itself is somewhat just clean up. We just want to make sure that things get included in the design booklet and on the site plan as noted. And also too, just wanted to make sure their plantings and their tree numbers were correct. So because I had gone through and just kind of spot checked some, and I thought maybe they needed to be verified. So I put that in there.
Any questions or comments? So the part one had 34, and how many additional units is this then?
Oh, well, you've caught me there. I'm not really sure now how many units are in this one. Hold on. Part two, 190 multifamily, 110 townhouses, 300 units.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I didn't see any updates since the workshop, is that right?
Oh, and I just wanted to mention also too, I believe those the retaining walls are more applied to the 2/2 units.
Okay, I'll write that down. 2/2. Thank you. All right. We're going fast. I don't think we're going to go this fast on Monday, guys.
One could only hope.
One can only hope. Highland Trail, the first is the preliminary plat, PC 22-1097.
So, just a couple of things from the workshop that they addressed at the workshop, but I just commented about those comments in the staff report. So they did update their modification letter for the street standard details. There's still one that they're listing that they don't need. It's for standard detail. I think it's number 12. So one of the conditions is for them to remove that. But other than that, not any other changes.
So are you saying changes since the workshop and reflected in this staff report? Is there were changes to modifications?
Yeah, there was a change to the modification request letter. They had to add a standard detail into it, but then they also added one that they don't need. So, okay. So as a condition, I've asked them to remove that one. And then there were some questions that that came up during the workshop with regard to the modifications and connections to Wren Quarter, as well as some street connections to the south of the property. So, but I believe the applicant had addressed all those then. So,
and I appreciate that you actually incorporated those comments into your staff report. So, any comments or questions?
No.
The two modifications, as they're listed in the staff report, I do not see any compensating design features. Is the applicant offering compensating design
Let's
features?
see. That is not one of the criteria for the modification requests. It's different than your typical modification request you see, like for landscaping and things like that. They have a different set that they have to meet, which is in section 510 of the LMC. Those are that the property is either subject to unusual conditions that make it impractical, or that the subdivision is subject to a master plan, which in this case it is. The second criteria is that the modification doesn't conflict with the general purpose and intent or the regulation, and that the modification doesn't conflict with any provision in the comprehensive plan.
And you have very clearly written that out on page 7, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Not part of the criteria.
Not this time.
So that moves us to the next one on the Highland Trail, which is the forest conservation plan for the trail.
Yeah, nothing has changed since the workshop on that. They addressed the them removing the majority of those trees, which they had to request a modification for that. So, but other than that, there are no changes since the workshop. Oh, I take that back. There are a couple things they need to correct on the plan, but those are noted in the conditions of approval.
Any questions? And is this another modification? I can't remember. We do this like every time. The specimen tree modification does not require compensating features, correct?
Let me just pull it up. No, I don't think they do. Let me find. Let's see. No, it's just that questions like, does it cause? Are they causing unwarranted hardship? Does it provide the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by others? Does it grant them a special privilege? Is it based on conditions that the applicant created? And does it arise from a condition relating to the land or building use?
And those inspection criteria that we talked to Pam about on the other item, those have already been incorporated in this.
Let's see, they are, yeah, they're on the plan. Are you talking about like the inspection timelines and when yeah, that's addressed on the plan. Oh, you're on mute.
Guys, I know I'm doing all this talking. Hopefully this saves us a lot of time on Monday. So I'm good. Anybody else? Thank you, Sherry.
Thanks.
Westridge Shopping Center. The first is the zoning map amendment. Second is the master plan. So my question is, they're listed on the agenda as 2 items. We have 1 staff report. So tell me how this is going to be handled. Are we going to have to hear it twice, or can we go through it all together once but have 2 separate votes?
Well, we bypassed Lisa. She was, I think we had Hood College before Westridge. I saw her pop on.
I apologize.
No, you were excited to get to it. And then I'll let's let Lisa do her thing, and then I'll jump back in.
Oh, so next, forget Westridge, is the zoning. I think I saw 2 zoning map amendments in my eyes, just bled it down. It's the zoning map amendment for Strawn Cottage, and this is HPC PC 23-437. Lisa.
Okay, so there are no changes to the application. This is a designation application that's being made as a result of demolition review. Really the only changes you'll see to the packet are that we made sure to include the property owner's statement of opposition and the copy of the approved HPC minutes that were inadvertently left out of the workshop packet. Also, as requested at the workshop, we included the HPO map, the draft version that was given to the HPC at their meeting that they modified in their recommendation, so that you could see what that was, and also just address that basically incorporated our verbal comments to those questions at workshop into the final staff report.
Any questions? Okay. Lisa, someplace I read that the boundary around was 0.68, and some other place I read it was 0.47. Is that what you mean? That, okay.
Yeah, that's correct. In the what we put for the HBC was just like straight out like a square around the property with some more distance at the front and to one of the sides. And the HBC and their recommendation wanted to expand it to include more of the open space. And so that's where the increase in the acreage happened.
So let me see if I get it then. Well, I'm looking at Exhibit A here with the red, and it looks like a trapezoid. Is this the current one or the original one? Matt.
So the one that the current one is the one that's attached to the HBC's letter of recommendation. And it is labeled, yeah, it is labeled Exhibit A. The initial draft that we presented to the HBC, it's attachment 8. It's the second to last page in the entire packet.
Okay, thank you. I see, got it. So the initial, what is the acreage of this Exhibit 8? The initial, just how many acres is this?
Let me see here.
I can't tell. It looks like it increased. I thought you said it increased.
In the HPC's recommendation, it did increase. It increased to incorporate more of that open space to the southwest of the structure.
Okay, so initially was the 0.47, I think, and now it's the 0.68.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's okay. I think that was my only question. Anybody else?
I just have one just for clarification. The address that we're talking about here, is that the general address for Hood and not the Stone Cottage? Okay, just want to make sure.
Okay. 2.68 Exhibit A. Okay. I'm good. Thank you. So now we go to the other zoning map amendment and the master plan, and Gabrielle.
Right. So this is the first of 2 hearings. So we'll do nothing at this meeting except do the applicant's full presentation, staff's presentation, questions, all that good stuff, public comment. We have received a good bit of public comment on that. Everything we've received up until today was in your packets attached. Anything that I received from today to Monday, I will make sure to forward email, and we include that in the record. I do, just for full awareness, I was notified last night from some of the NAC members that the applicant was meeting with the community last night at a special meeting they were holding. I was not aware of it, and it was separate from our city public notice requirements that they met. So just to put that out there in case there, any reference to that at the meeting. Don't want you to be unfamiliar with that. I'm not sure the content and nature of that discussion, but it did happen, which is good. So hopefully the applicant was able to explain their project in more detail, whether that concerns people more or makes people less concerned is, one of those things. So this is the master plan and the zoning map amendment, conditional rezoning to the MU2. So your recommendation to the mayor and board will be on both the rezoning request as well as the master plan itself. We have some updates in the staff report since the workshop were related primarily to the road improvements that they have, the cross sections that they're providing, including a detail for Key Parkway, which will ultimately at some point have a protected bike lane. So they've showed a concept of that, what that would look like. That's a new street detail on page 2 of the plan set, I believe it is. They are also requesting modifications for the local street sections, and you'll see an adjustment from the workshop to now on that as well. There are 2 roads that hit Key Parkway perpendicularly that come down to meet the avenue. On the westernmost, in our workshop summary, we talked about how the applicant wasn't providing sidewalk on both sides and how we wanted to see sidewalk on both sides of that public street. The applicant's concern and the limitation was the topography and loading spaces for the remaining commercial components that's going to stay on the site. Now we've worked with the applicant since the workshop. They're now providing 2 alternate street details, a B1 and a B2. The B1 would be what would be constructed with this project, and they've increased the width of the sidewalk on the residential side. So on the portion that's going to be redeveloped, they would be increasing that to an 8-foot wide path, so to allow for better connectivity, more modes of transport, and more room to support both bikes and pedestrians. And then the B2 alternative would be at some point in the future, if and when the commercial component redevelops, how they could incorporate 5-foot sidewalk on that side as well. So that adjustment has been made since the workshop. That's
Does it say in here since the workshop?
It does not.
Okay, I didn't see that, so okay.
Correct now.
Got it.
We've pulled out the areas where they're requesting their modifications. That'll all be part of your recommendation on the master plan ultimately.
And we can talk about, because we're not taking votes this month, we can have the staff report and the applicant talk about M&N at the same time, correct?
Yes, correct. Correct. And they are, I mean, they're very, when we get to the action on it, they are very much one and the same, because keep in mind when you're making a recommendation and when the board is approving a zoning map amendment for the MU2, the criteria is that the plan, basically the request is going to comply with the mixed use standards. So how do we demonstrate that? We demonstrate that through the master plan itself. So they really are super interwoven in terms of, in order to recommend approval of the zoning change, you have to find that the plan itself is consistent with the provisions for that zone that they're requiring. So they're hard to, I like to make things nice and clean and separate, but they really are hard to pull apart because they're relying on each other. So yes, I would recommend discussing them all together.
You're muted, Barb.
I don't know how that happens. The concept notion when the zoning map amendment and the relative master plan both are recommendations from the Planning Commission. Is this something that we've done in the past? Because I don't remember we have done it. Can you give 1 or 2 examples just to trigger our memories?
So the Madison was an MU2 rezoning. Now we've moved with this plan that we'll present on Monday, that's the site plan. So that's kind of the next step after that rezoning and master plan. Highland Trail was also a request for a floating zone MU2 that had that zoning map and master plan all at the same time.
So the master plan in those cases also were recommendations from us?
Correct. The interesting thing is when it gets to the mayor and board, and it would be interesting to see this happen, the board could, in theory, approve the rezoning, but not approve the master plan and kind of remand it back to the planning commission. I don't know under what circumstance that would happen because, as I said, in order to meet the findings of the rezoning, you have to find that the proposal meets the criteria for the development proposed. So I don't know how the mayor and board would mentally get to a place where they'd go, well, we want to rezone it, but we don't approve this master plan. I guess in theory it could happen. So in that instance, the mayor and board could say, yes, we want it to be MU2, and then conceivably there would be something with the master plan that would have to change because the mayor and board didn't want to approve it. And the applicant could bring that back to just the planning commission, and it wouldn't have to go back to the mayor and board, but that has never happened.
That makes total sense. I mean, now that I think about it, I'm sort of like, duh, it just doesn't make sense that a commission could not approve a master plan on a piece of property where the zoning has not changed yet.
Yep. Yeah, no worries.
How was that recent text amendment? I know it's referred to in here. How did that inform, impact this this application? Remind us about that.
So that text amendment allowed the applicant to request modifications to all sections of section 417. So 417 is our mixed use standards. It said in the case of redevelopment, everything in section 417 is on the table in terms of being able to request for a modification for it. So all of the standards therein. And then it tied those modification criteria back to being consistent with the purpose and intent of section 417, having those compensating design features and consistency with the comprehensive plan. As Sherry talked about with the preliminary plat process, when we're subdividing, there are different criteria for a modification. At the master plan stage, the criteria for granting modification with the master plan is kind of silent at this point. There aren't those same standards that consistency and compensating design feature. For example, with the PND, the planning commission is given very wide latitude to approve adjustments to typical setbacks or building heights or different standards, just under the auspices of creating a cohesive planned neighborhood development. And there aren't those like threshold questions that we talk about so often, which are specific to a site plan. So what this text amendment was very much define 3 specific criteria that now, even at a master plan stage, in the context of redevelopment in the MU district, you have to consider those standards specifically. Does that help?
I'll read back more. I just have to go back and refresh for everybody because you talked about this at length at the workshop. So, okay. Anybody have any questions on this?
I just heard something there that it just made me think, is it okay if we talk about that Carroll Creek text amendment again, item number 1?
Sure.
I don't know.
I mean, not a deliberation, but
right.
As we don't do at these, but as far as having questions, et cetera, yes.
Right. And that's it's mostly a procedural thing because I heard there and I wasn't sure in terms of if the context there of the project that the Westridge that we're just talking about, if we either tie again or or deny that. Can they go to the board without our recommendation?
Correct. Right. So yeah, if you recommend denial, if you say, no, we hate this and we'll never approve it, it would still progress to the Board of Aldermen.
Okay.
We are a recommending body for all
Yep.
text amendments.
For
Okay.
better or worse.
Okay.
And thank you for clarifying that, Ron.
Mhm.
Because we've been talking about this one for a long time. All righty then. Another page. Hold on. No, that's it.
That's it.
Okay.
That's
So I know I did a lot of talking here. Anything, Joan? From you? Okay.
Nope, I'm good.
April?
No questions.
Okay, good. So I said, I know that there's a lot here. So I assume it's going to be a long meeting. Do we have any hard stops, Gabrielle, that we're aware of?
Our evening meetings, I think we have a policy, but we can't start any new items after 11. But
Well, other than, yeah.
that,
Okay.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
been a long time since
My hard
since we
stop is
had
I fall
to.
asleep at about 11:30. So that now, yeah, hopefully,
Okay. So
hopefully.
obviously we will be prepared with breaks and just everybody will know what they bring, their water and food, etc. So, all right. Well, everybody have a good weekend.
You too.
See you Monday. The meeting is adjourned.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.